Hello everybody, in this video I'm going to talk you through the rules associated with classical harmony. I'm going to do this in the context of the Leaving Cert music course in Ireland, but most music schools throughout the Western world approach harmony in the same way. It is largely based on the work of Hugo Riemann, a German musicologist and theorist who devised a system that is known as functional harmony. As the video progresses, I'll get into the details regarding functional harmony, so this video can be used as a broader introduction to classical harmony. I have timestamped the sections of the video below, so if you already know some of the basic principles, you can fast forward to the more advanced techniques. And I have also sequenced the video so that we do cover the most basic techniques first and leave the more advanced concepts till the end. A full PDF booklet of everything that I talk about is available from my Patreon page, so if you're interested, please click the link below. So let's dive into it. We're going to start with a chord bank and cadences. Let us look at how to construct a chord bank for C major. The first thing you need to do is write the 7 notes that happen in C major. They are C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. Now what we're going to do is build triads based on those notes. When building a triad, you need 3 components. You need the root of the chord, you need the third above the root, and you need the 5th above the root. An easy way of doing this is circling the note you want to build a triad on and just skipping 2 notes in the scale. C, skip over D to E, skip over F to G. This gives you the 3 notes that belong in the triad of C major. When we line them up, they happen to make a major triad. Fast forwarding and doing this on all of the degrees of the scale gives you the following: C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished. And lastly, in our chord bank, we're going to apply Roman numerals to each of the degrees of the scale. This will help us to think in many different keys, in much the same way as tonic solfa does for melody. When writing Roman numerals, major chords are denoted with capital Roman numerals, so 1, 4, and 5 in the context of C major. Chords 2, 3, and 6 are given lowercase Roman numerals, and diminished chords in Roman numerals are denoted with a little superscript circle above the Roman numeral. So B diminished is chord 7 in C major. Cadences help to punctuate the phrases in music. They let us know when a piece has come to a final resting place, or they let us know when there is more music to come. The 4 main cadences are a perfect cadence, an imperfect cadence, a plagal cadence, and an interrupted or deceptive cadence. In functional harmony, the chords are divided up into 3 categories: tonic function, subdominant function, and dominant function. And the strongest relationship happens between the dominant and tonic chords. This is why the perfect cadence is considered one of the strongest harmonic progressions. The perfect cadence consists of chords 5 to 1 or G to C in the context of C major. The imperfect cadence is in many ways the reverse of this. It is where any chord lands on chord 5. This gives the music a sense that there is more to come, and ending on the 5 chord is unresolved, so your ear anticipates that there will be a future phrase in which the music will resolve. An imperfect cadence can happen from chords 1 to 5, 2 to 5, 4 to 5, or 6 to 5. A plagal cadence in music is another full stop point. It involves chord 4 going to 1. In the context of C major, that means chord F going to chord C. This is often referred to as the Great Amen, as it happens at the end of a lot of religious choral music. An interrupted cadence or deceptive cadence is where we have chord 5 going to chord 6. In C major, that means the chord of G going to A minor. The reason why it's called an interrupted or deceptive cadence is because your ear expects to hear 1 after the 5 chord and gets a surprise when it hears 6 instead. Next, we're going to look at the chords in a major key that are available for you to use in the Leaving Cert composing paper. These chords just so happen to be the most commonly used chords in classical harmony. In root position, you can use chords 1, 2, 4, 5, 5, 7, and 6. Or in the context of C major, that is C, D minor, F, G, G7, and A minor. The available inversions that you can use are 1B and 1C, 2B, 4B, 5B, and 5/7B. In this next section of the video, I'm going to detail how each of the chords in a major key like to behave and where they like to move to. And from looking at each of these chords, I'm then going to make a list of rules that we can deduce from how they commonly like to move. This should make the rules a little bit easier to manage and a little bit easier to remember once we have our list of deductions. So let us look first at the 1 chord. So in functional classical harmony, each of the chords of a diatonic key is given one of 3 categories: tonic function, subdominant function, and dominant function. The 1 chord fits into tonic function. It likes to move to the following chords. You can go 1 to 6, or C to A minor. It can go 1 to 4, or C to F major. It can go 1 to 5, or C to G. Or it can move by step 1 to 2, but then after it moves by step, it typically wants to leap away. So we would commonly find this chord progression: 1, 2, 5, or C, D minor, G. As you can see on screen now, chord C to A minor is an example of chords falling a third. C to F can be considered rising a fourth or falling a fifth, depending on what octave you come from. C to G similarly can be considered rising a fifth or falling a fourth, depending on the octave the C is in. And C to D minor to G covers the moving by step and then leaping away after. Make a note of these rules as they will form the list of rules at the end of this section. Next we come to chord 2. Chord 2 in functional harmony is given subdominant or predominant status. In the key of C major, chord 2 is D minor, and it likes to move as follows: 2 to 5, or D minor to G. Or 2 to 6, D minor to A minor. In both of these instances, you have the rule of rising a fourth or falling a fifth. We skip chord 3 as it is not allowed to be used on the Leaving Cert course, and in most classical schools of music and thought, chord 3 is to be avoided. The reason for this is there's a contradiction of functionality within the chord. It has both the leading note and the mediant or third of the scale. The leading note is considered to be the most unstable note and wants to resolve, which is what gives a dominant chord its sense of direction. But it also has the mediant, which is considered to be the stabilizing note of the 1 chord, which is, of course, tonic function. It's this battle within the chord between tonic and dominant which makes it a tricky chord to employ in the context of functional harmony. Chord 4 in the key of C major is F, and it likes to move as follows. 4 to 1, which is also our play cadence, which is F to C. 4 to 2, which is F to D minor. Or it can move by step, but then would like to leap away after. We could have an approach and a perfect cadence like this. F, G, C, or 4, 5, and 1. Let us now go on to the 5 chord. The chord of 5, as I previously mentioned, houses the leading note of the scale. And it's this leading note that gives chord 5 its sense of direction and the tendency it has to want to resolve to chord 1. This tendency to want to resolve is the characteristic feature of a dominant chord. The 5 chord wants to move as follows. 5 to 1, which is also our perfect cadence. 5 can move by step to 6, but then wants to leap away after. G to A minor to F major. Chord 5 to chord 4 to chord 1 is a less commonly used chord progression in classical harmony, but is acceptable on the Leaving Cert harmony question. Now let us look at the 6th chord. In functional harmony, the 6th chord is considered to have tonic function. It shares the mediant and indeed the tonic note that exists in the chord of 1. Here is how it likes to behave. 6 can go to chord 2, A minor to D minor, or it can move by step to the 5 chord and then would like to leap away after. So you could get the chord progression 6, 5, 1. And lastly, you can move by falling a third from 6 to 4. To summarise how chords like to move in classical harmony, we can deduce the following list from all that we've looked at. Number 1 is chords falling or rising a perfect 4th or perfect 5th work well. Number 2 is chords that fall a third also work well. And number 3 is the principle that if chords move by step, they generally want to leap away afterwards. There is one exception to this rule, and that is in the context of an interrupt cadence, you can often see chord 4 going to chord 5 going to chord 6. Now that we've got the main chords looked at in a key, I'm going to turn the attention to the dominant 7th or 5/7 chord in a major key. There are some unique things to say about this chord, so I've left it isolated away from the other chords and how they like to behave. So the 5/7 chord has dominant function in a major key. To get the 5/7 chord, we build a triad the same way we did before. We have G, up a third is B, up a third is D. But to get the 7th above the root, we just simply go up another third and include F. This chord has dominant function just as the 5 chord does, but by adding the 7th we have now made it more unstable. It now has a greater tendency to want to resolve, and this is how it behaves. It resolves to either the 1 chord or the 6 chord. On the Leaving Cert course, the 7th does not have to be present in the melody for you to use the 5/7 chord, but there are a few things to observe about its use that I'm going to detail now. So in a 5/7 chord, G7 in the key of C major, the 7th note wants to fall by step, that is F falling to E in the context of C major. If the 7th of a 5/7 chord occurs in the melody and you want to use the chord 5/7, you must ensure that the 7th is obeying this rule of falling by step. See the example on screen. We have a D going to an F and it falls to E. So the chord progression 5-7 to 1 or G7 to C can be used effectively here. In this next example, it would be incorrect to use the 5-7 chord because this melody goes D, F and rises upwards towards G. So the 7th does not behave the way it should in a dominant 7th chord or a 5-7 chord. The more appropriate chord pattern here is chord 2 to chord 5. And the last use of the 5-7 chord is as follows. In a bar that clearly outlines the chord of 5 for the entire bar, but requires 2 chords in that bar, you can use the 5-7 chord like this. Chord 5 for the first 2 beats of the bar, and 5-7 for the last 2 beats of the bar. A very important thing to note is that you cannot do this in reverse. You cannot start with a 5-7 chord and go to a 5 chord. Having looked at the chords that work well, here are just a few chord progressions that we would like to avoid if possible. The first is 2 to 1. 2 to 1 is considered a weak progression in the classical context, as is 5 to 2, which is an exception to the rising or falling a 4th or 5th rule. And then lastly, chords rising a third is also considered weak in the classical context. That would include the chord progressions 2 to 4 or D minor to F. It would also include the chords 4 to 6, which is F to A minor. And it would also include the chord 6 to 1, which is A minor rising up a third to C. So that's how all of the chords of the major key in a classical context like to behave. So in the next video I'm going to do a part 2 where I cover everything to do with the bass clef or left hand of the piano. That part 2 video will include inversions, parallel fifths and octaves and how to avoid them, and then stylistic features around writing effective bass lines. Just before I go, a reminder that all of the information from today's video is housed in a PDF that you can get from my Patreon page. If you're interested, click the link below. As ever, thanks for watching, and if you found any of it useful, please consider hitting subscribe. This has been David Kennedy, and I'll see you in the next one.